Okay, let's go ahead and start talking about intercompany debt transactions. And we have some easy examples and some harder examples. Let's go ahead and start with the easy one first. Now, firms may engage in transactions involving the debt of a related firm, and let's go ahead and think of this from the perspective of a bond transaction. All of this same stuff would apply in the case of a note transaction or simply of an interest-bearing receivable, but let's go ahead and consider it from the perspective of a bond transaction. Now, there are going to be two basic types of transactions we're going to need to be familiar with. One, when a firm sells bonds directly to the related party. So, big company wants to borrow $1 million, they issue some bonds, and little buys them directly from big company. The second type of transaction is where one firm buys the debt of a related firm on the open market. So, big company issues some bonds on the open market, little company comes along a few years later and buys them up. Let's go ahead and start with a case where big issues bonds directly to little. Now, if a firm issues bonds which are bought by a related party, the consolidated entity has essentially sold itself its own bonds. The issuing firm has bonds payable, a discounted premium on bonds payable, and interest expense. The other firm has investment in bonds in the same amount and interest revenue. Now, assuming that both firms use the same amortization method for any discounted premium, which they should, the asset and liability should exactly offset each other, and the interest expense and interest revenue should exactly offset each other. So for example, let's assume that big company owns 70% of little company. On January 1st, 2001, big company issues $100,000 of 10% 10-year bonds directly to little company for $103,000. The bonds pay interest each December 31st, and both firms use straight line amortization. Now let's see what's on Big and Little's books at the end of that first year, 2001. On Big's books, again, Big is the bond issuer. They've got bonds payable of $100,000. They've got a premium on bonds of $2,700. Again, it was initially a 3% or $3,000 premium. It's being amortized over 10 years, so at the end of the first year it's down to $2,700. And they've got interest expense of $9,700, the $10,000 of coupon interest minus the $300 of premium amortization. Over on Little's books, it's sort of a mirror image. Again, the big and little company represent two sides of the same transaction. So little company has an investment in bonds of $102,700. Again, they originally bought it for $103,000. They amortized $300 of that. And little has interest revenue of $9,700. So just refreshing our memory of what they've got on their books. The elimination entry simply involves offsetting the asset and liability and the revenue and expense against each other. So we'll go ahead and eliminate the bonds payable and the premium on bonds with a debit. And we'll eliminate the investment in bonds with a credit, so there we're offsetting the liability against the asset. And at the same time we offset the revenue against the expense. Now these transactions are always a wash in terms of income. The amount of interest revenue we're eliminating equals the amount of interest expense that we're eliminating, so there's no effect on net income. Again, when one company issues bonds directly to a related party, the consolidated entity is essentially issuing debt to itself, which is a non-event, is a non-transaction. So there shouldn't be any interest revenue, there shouldn't be any interest expense, there shouldn't be any liability, there shouldn't be any asset.